Okay, we are live with Lynn McTaggart. Thank you so much, Lynn, for being with me today. Are you in London right now?
I'm in London, absolutely.
Okay, that's amazing that we can connect so far away from each other.
I know, absolutely.
The last time that we talked, it was a long time ago. It was like maybe 2012 or 13, something like that.
Wow.
You published The Bond, and I've been following you from the very beginning. I have something that I want to mention here. You wrote four books. You wrote seven books, but the four books that I know that I read actually is The Field in 2003, The Intentional Experiment in 2008, and that's when we did the interview talking about the intentional experiment and the bond in 2012, and now in 2017, The Power of Eight, that I have a copy right here, and I read it, and it's amazing. I love it. I think it's great, and especially for the times that we are going through right now. The pandemic situation, the whole world being in this lockdown, and everybody separated, and a lot of fear going on. How do you live that in London?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
How do you
How do I?
live the quarantine, the pandemic in London?
Oh, well, we had a gradual lifting up of restrictions over the summer so that everything opened up. And now they're busily shutting things down a little bit now. They say cases are going up, although deaths aren't.
Hmm.
Deaths are still low.
Uh-huh.
So the hope is that the virus is getting a lot less virulent and that we don't have to have a total lockdown again. So I
Okay.
think the feeling is we're not going to completely lock down, but there's a curfew now with pubs and restaurants at 10 o'clock p.m.
Okay.
And there's other restrictions on the number of people that can congregate together.
Well, different countries have different laws and different restrictions. We in Los Angeles live a little, looser. Like we don't have so many rules, but some places in Latin America are very, very strict with the laws, and they cannot do anything, almost anything. So, um, in these 15 years, going back to 2003, from the first book that I mentioned, The Field. Do you think the whole idea evolved from the field to the power of eight in stages? I mean, how do you see that? Because actually, I can see the whole trajectory of your research and how evolved and where we are right now.
Absolutely. Well, my books are really a result of my questions and enthusiasms. And so the field, I, I began to be interested in the late 90s about whether there was such a thing as energy fields, human energy fields, because I wanted to try to find out why something like homeopathy or spiritual healing works, in particular spiritual healing. How can you have a thought and send it to someone else and make that person better? That seemed to defy everything we know about how the world works. And so I set off to try to, on a quest really, to find out whether there were energy fields. And what I found was far bigger and grander than that. I found a number of frontier scientists whose work completely created an upheaval in everything the way we think the world works. It drove a stake into the heart of conventional science. And each of them had a section of it, but together it compounded into a completely new view of the world.
Hmm.
So there was some leftover business about the idea that thoughts are an actual something with the capacity to change physical matter. There were many studies like that. So that really uh, begat the field, the intention experiment,
Hmm.
because I realized that, we needed to test this. And being the skeptical journalist that I am at heart, I wanted to see how far we could take this. Is this, are we talking about a tiny little effect like shifting a quantum particle? Are we talking about healing somebody of cancer? And also, what happens when lots of people are doing the same thing and thinking the same thought at the same time? Does that magnify the effect? So the book, The Intention Experiment, was set out to not only look at the science of intention, but also broader than that, to test it in these giant experiments with my readers. And the bond was really an answer to how do we live the new science?
Mm.
And finally, the power of eight was essentially my discoveries, scaling this down to small groups of eight or so, and doing small group intention, and the miraculous rebound effects that I began to witness.
In the book, The Power of Eight, the subtitle says, Harnessing the Miraculous Energies of a Small Group to Heal Others, Your Life, and the World. What a title. I mean, that's huge. Now, the word energy here, because that's what hits me, miraculous energies, is related to the human electromagnetic field. What is it related to?
Well, what I see is, yes, we do have certain electromagnetic energy, but there's a bigger amount of energy here that we're all part of. In my book, The Field, I discovered that we are all part of a giant quantum field. It's called the zero point field, and essentially it's made up of everyone and everything's subatomic particles, sending energy back and forth like an endless game of tennis. And that endless game of tennis between all the subatomic particles and all the things in all the world creates this giant amount of unfathomably strong energy, which is just sitting there out in empty space like some supercharged backdrop. So we are part of this. We don't enter into the field. Lots of people say, well, I entered into the field. Well, you are the field. You're part of this field all the time. So it's that. But when I talk about energy, harnessing energy, I'm really talking about harnessing a kind of state of oneness that is present when a small group or a large group of people are intending the same thing at the same time. It expresses itself as actual physical energy. People talk all the time about whether they're holding hands in a circle or doing this remotely via something like Zoom. It works the same either way. They feel an enormous amount of energy coming out of the computer, coming out of their hands. Many feel it almost like an electric shock. They feel, they cry uncontrollably. They just feel this power, this surge. And so that is an energy. But I think, as I say, it's a state that we enter because we are all part of this field. We are not separate. We are not what we've been told, but we don't experience it as we don't experience oneness. We experience separation. Parts of our brain, for instance, the parietal lobes that sit right here, help us navigate through space, and they essentially tell us what's me and what's not me. So they help create a sense of separation. But when we're united in a common intention and we connect together like that, it's not like meditation or even group meditation. It's something very different, a highly focused state of mind. But that changes reality for us, and we experience this enormous sense of oneness. And it is that I think proves extraordinarily healing, miraculously healing.
Now, is the quantum field an important element on the intention equation? Because actually, we don't have, you're mentioning time and space don't matter, and it works at a distance, and without the quantum field, we couldn't even talk about intention.
No. And I'll give you an example as part of my intention experiments, because before I started experimenting with small groups, power of eight groups, I was running the intention experiment. So what I did with that is, as I say, I told you earlier, I wanted to test intention, test it to the limit. So I, at the time, thanks to the work in the field, knew a lot of scientists involved with consciousness research. And I also had lots of readers around the world because the field was in 30 languages. So I just thought, well, if I put them together, I'm going to have the biggest global laboratory in the world. And that's what we did. We began setting up simple experiments at first, and then periodically asking my global audience or an actual audience, if I were speaking somewhere, to set an intention to some well-controlled target in a laboratory or out there in the field. So we started small with things like trying to affect light emissions, just subtle processes of a leaf, and moved on to trying to make seeds grow faster. So I tell you about this experiment, and we also did purifying water, lowering violence, healing people, etc. But I want to tell you about the seed experiment because it's very interesting in illustrating how this intention works over time. So, and over space. So, with this experiment, I was working with the University of Arizona and Dr. Gary Schwartz, noted psychologist.
Yeah.
He in his laboratory would gather 4 sets of seeds, photograph all 4 sets, label them A, B, C, D, send me the photographs. And the first time I wanted to do this experiment, I was in Sydney, Australia, speaking in front of an audience of 700. So we randomly chose one of the seeds to send intention to, didn't tell the scientists which ones we were sending intention to. Let's say we sent them to group A. We sent our intention. We told the scientists when we were done that we were done, still didn't tell them which ones we sent intention to. They planted all 4 sets of seeds and 5 days later measured the results. Mm-hmm. And we discovered, lo and behold, and at that point we unblinded the study, that the seeds sent intention grew significantly higher than controls. Okay. And we ran it 5 more times when I was speaking in different parts of the world, in Rhinebeck, New York, and South Carolina, and Dallas, Texas, and LA, and then over the internet, and every single time, the only seeds that grew significantly highest were the seeds sent intention. So let's unpack it for a moment. Let's take that first experiment. So there I am with my audience in Sydney, Australia, and we're sending intention to a set of seeds that are sitting in Tucson, Arizona, 8,000 miles away. And we're not sending intention to the thing itself, we're sending intention to a photograph of the thing, a symbolic representation of the thing. Yet we're having an effect. We're having a significant effect. So from that, I realized, thanks to the field, it must be that we create some sort of psychic internet when we focus together on a target. And that happens, and we see this with Power-Based groups when people come together virtually, like we are now in this Zoom call. We've got people on this call, various people helping with this broadcast. We're all on a call. Now, if this was a Power-Based group, we could be in different places around the globe. Okay. But when we come together to do an intention, you would feel that energy, and chances are you would get the outcome. I run courses, master classes, and foundation courses, advanced courses on intention. And in my Power-Based Intention Masterclass, which I just run once a year, I put people into groups of 8 or so, and they're with that group for a whole year while I teach them all sorts of things, and we do all kinds of experiments together. And they focus on healing some aspect of their lives. Now, these people become closer, in a sense, than their own family. Yet, they are all virtual. They might be in the same time zone, but they're not anywhere near each other. Most of them carry on doing this even after the year is over. It becomes their intention family. But they've never met. They don't meet. They aren't in person. And so this kind of psychic internet can create these kind of extraordinary experiences and healings in various areas of your life, just by the connection, no matter how virtual.
Now, intention needs faith to work?
No, it doesn't. That's the remarkable thing. And I'll tell you why with a story about a young boy called Luke. Now, Luke's stepfather wrote me one day and said, my goodness, my 15-year-old stepson has had a terrible situation. He broke up with his first serious girlfriend, and in a fit of adolescent angst, he threw himself off a 40-foot structure onto hard ground.
Whoa.
Now, Luke was barely alive when he was brought to the hospital. Everything was broken. He had nerve damage, he had brain damage, he was just a mess. And the doctors weren't even sure he was going to live. So I had at the time a master class going, and I asked them to set an intention for Luke. And we did 3 separate occasions where we did intention for Luke. And the phenomenal thing was his stepfather kept a running commentary of what was going on with Luke, and then wrote about what happened just at the points of intention. And we saw amazing shifts the 3 times we set intention for him. He got out of the hospital in record time. The bone damage was healed, the brain damage was healed, the nerve damage was healed. He is now 18 and he is an absolutely healthy young man. Now, that was remarkable in itself, but we can't say it's a placebo effect because he was 15 at the time, and Luke, like most 15-year-olds, believed that his parents' belief in the power of beliefs in general, but particularly the power of intention, was stupid. So it
Okay.
couldn't be a placebo effect. And we've seen that with people who are unconscious, who aren't necessarily believers. They can get affected. I think the people sending the intention need to have some sort of expectation
And
and
what
belief
and
to,
what
to
about
take.
what about unconditional love?
What about it?
Well, if there's an intention behind it, if you don't have, I mean, faith is not part of it. You have to be working from the chakra of the heart. You have to be open from the heart or not. It doesn't matter. It's just
No, you do have to be open from the heart. And I think this is one of the key elements, Jorge, of
okay.
how this works because it's not an intellectual exercise.
Okay.
I tell people, okay, formulate the intention, very specific, but then bring it down to your heart and send it out. And what we find is that when people send out unconditional love from their heart, that seems to be the secret sauce. That
Okay.
altruistic act of just sending intention for a total stranger or
Mm-hmm.
somebody they've just met
Mm-hmm.
is also healing for the sender. And that was the most remarkable thing about it for me with both the intention experiments and the Power of 8 groups, that the senders were also getting healed too. Now, I just
Okay.
told you that story um, about Luke. And the interesting thing about that story was what happened to a woman called Andy Spiros. Now, Andy was a young woman who had 2 small children and was going through a divorce. She had sold her gift store and needed a new career, and she needed money. And she was very talented, a good marketer, a good coach, and she couldn't get a job no matter where she looked. And she was part of my master class where people were in small groups and working together, and nothing they did was working. So, and she kept saying, I've tried this, I've tried that. So I finally just said, probably in exasperation, oh, Auntie, get off of yourself. Intend for somebody else. So I had her intend for Luke. And the moment she started focusing on Luke, literally that next week, she got a call from somebody she didn't even know offering her her dream job. So that has happened over and over and over again to the point where I needed to find out why. What what part of this does altruism play in? So I started looking at the science of altruism, and it's amazing. It's like a bulletproof vest. People who do altruistic things are healthier, happier, and live longer in every way. And I started thinking that this is a part of this power of eight situation, and also the intention experiments. That's the real power to it. Because the other thing I started seeing with the intention experiments is once we got off of seeds and water and that and started intending for human beings, and we started doing peace intention experiments in war torn or very violent areas back in 2008. And I surveyed my participants. The first time we did it, we set an intention to lower violence and to heal the war that was going on in Sri Lanka. And a war not many people were thinking about over here in the West. But it was a 75-year-old war, a 25-year-old war. And it had looked like there was no end in sight. So we did that, and there were remarkable things that happened, extraordinary things, particularly the week, just the week of our intention, the very week of it. The government, which had been losing, won several important battles that helped it turn around the entire course of the war. Within a few months, it had reclaimed the North, which had been completely choked off by the rebels. And a few months after that, the entire 25-year war was over. Now, it ended in a bloody finish, but it ended. And now, did we do this? Short answer, who knows? Because there are many variables. But I have to say, we've run 8 peace intention experiments, and every single one has shown some sort of significant effect. But that isn't even the interesting part of the story. The interesting part of the story is what happened to the participants.
Okay.
So I surveyed them after this, and to my astonishment, I got back things like this. I felt like I was part of a higher network, they wrote, or I was crying uncontrollably, or I felt this enormous electricity like I was in the tractor beam of Star Trek. Now, remember, people participating were just coming onto my website at the same moment, sending the same intention together, but they were all scattered around the globe. We had about 15,000 people in that one. And yet they had this extraordinary personal effect. But even more interesting was what happened in their lives. They were reporting things like they were making up with estranged relatives, partners, loved ones. They were getting along better with their bosses and coworkers. And about 40% of them said, remarkably, the highest percentage, said they're more in love with everybody they come in contact with. It's kind of like they were hugging strangers. So I did not know what was going on, but that has happened every single time with every intention experiment.
Well,
And it is this coming together, this experience of oneness that enables the heart to leap across the fence.
I think it's related to doing service to others. No, so we know that servicing others help us as well. So I think that's the equation that is happening right now with this intention in a group. No, now
It is, and it's that experience of oneness. I think this is, one of the things that I kept asking and asking and asking, what on earth is going on here? Because I was seeing these extraordinary mirror effects.
Yeah.
If people participated in a peace intention experiment, their lives became more peaceful and changed forever. And if they participated in a healing intention experiment, we did one to heal someone of post-traumatic stress disorder. Not only did this person, Todd Boss, be healed and go traveling after that, he was a soldier in the Gulf War, and he'd come back with really extraordinary post-traumatic stress disorder. And he never went back for treatment after our intention, went traveling, found the love of his life, and, was the last we've heard, he has been really well. But more interestingly was what happened with my audience. Because the audience, when I asked for feedback, again, I was hearing things like, my arthritic knee doesn't hurt anymore and I'm walking normally. My digestion is improving. end of a skin condition. My migraines are gone, and on and on and on, thousands of these. So I think there is something in that movement into oneness and combined with that altruism that is an extraordinary healer for everyone involved.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this because in my search to try to find out what on earth was going on here, we did a study of small groups, power of 8 groups. And I'll tell you a moment about how I shrunk these down and what happened. But we found that very quickly, and we just used student volunteers who were total novices. They'd never meditated before, even. And we had them do small power of 8 groups to heal somebody in the group with some sort of health challenge, while putting an EEG cap to measure brain waves on one member of each group. And very quickly, we found that the person with the EEG cap would register big changes in brain waves. The parts of the brain that make us feel separate, like the parietal lobes, which I mentioned earlier in this broadcast, and even the right frontal lobes, portions of which are involved when we feel worry, doubt, negativity. They were all dialed way down. And these brainwave signatures were not anything like meditation, nothing like, which surprised me and the neuroscientists who conducted this experiment at Life University, largest chiropractic university in the world. Worked with their neuroscientists, worked with me on this experiment. But what the brainwave signatures looked like were virtually identical to Buddhist monks involved in ecstatic prayer or Sufi masters involved in chanting. So these were people in a state of essentially ecstatic oneness, a feeling of ecstatic, and that's what my participants report all the time. A state of ecstatic oneness that seems to extend out then into their lives and change them. So I think it's that. And remember too, the students in this study were complete and total novices. They only had a little bit of instruction from me. They were not master meditators. It didn't require hours of practice or, on their knees or a sweat lodge or anything like that. All they needed was a common intention and a group. And it was a kind of a very rapid passport to the miraculous.
Now, what's the difference between intention and focus visualization? And do you think about the outcome or the problem when you put an intention?
Wait, the intention and visualization?
If there's a difference between intention and focused visualization.
Focused visualization. Well, first of all, the focused visualization usually is, just visual. It's a visual and you maybe imagining an outcome. That is part of the intention process.
Okay.
When I was formulating how to do intention, back with the intention experiment, I studied the work and the practices of many intention masters, master healers, Qigong monks, Buddhist monks, master healers of all, Qigong masters of all varieties. And I also studied the science. And while many of the practices were very peculiar to that modality, many also had some commonalities. And I tried to put them together in a simple program that everyone could follow that I call powering up. And so part of that process, there are 13 keys to really mastering intention. Maybe 7 of them are the most essentials. And of all of those, visualization is an important part of it too. It's not the essential part because not everybody is visual. Some people are auditory, some people are kinesthetic, some people think in words. But as much as you can be to imagine the outcome in some capacity, imagine it with your thoughts as well as using the words and using it from your heart.
Okay. Now, how long and how often you have to put your intention, and in any situation that you want to change? It's just one session, different sessions. How do you do that?
Well, one thing that you don't do is constantly stay on it. What I tell people is do it a few times and then trust the process and get off of it and start intending for someone else. The intention themselves are only 10 minutes. Many people think you need to spend hours,
Mm,
on your knees or whatever. We only did intention experiments and small group intentions for 10 minutes.
okay.
So you don't have to do it long and you don't have to do it constantly. You do it a few times, let it go, and maybe come back to it. Um, but the main thing, the key thing you need is the group. I have seen so many extraordinary miracles in small groups, not just with these intention experiments, that I'm convinced that it is an amplification process. And so are many people who are ardent long term intenders and meditators have found that the group process accelerates all of it. And that really came to me by accident. Back in 2008, after I'd run a number of intention experiments, I thought I'd like to scale this down and do something about this in a workshop. But I wasn't really sure what to do. So I was kicking around the whole idea with my husband, Brian. And I said to him, we had one or two other people in this meeting, and I said to him, oh, I don't know. I said to all of them, I don't know. I think I'll put people in groups of 8 or so and have them send healing intention to somebody with a health problem. And my husband's a journalist too, and turned to me and he said, I love it, the power of 8. And that's exactly how it started. We didn't really expect that anything was going to happen. We thought maybe it would be a feel good effect. When we had our first workshop in Chicago in 2008 in the spring, we took the 100 or so people, put them in groups of 8 or so, had them send healing intention to a member of the group with a health problem, some sort of health challenge. Then we asked them to come back the next day. And as I say, I felt it was going to be a mild effect, like getting your back rubbed a bit or having a facial, just a nice feel good effect. Well, that's not what happened. The next day, when people came back and reported on their findings, one after another took the mic and said things like this. I haven't been able to walk normally for years. I have really bad arthritis and I was walking normally today. I have migraines and they've been completely healed. I have terrible gut issues and my gut feels normal today. I have cataracts and I'm 80% better. And on and on and on it went like this for over an hour. So I was flabbergasted by the whole thing. And I did not know what on earth was going on here. And I didn't really believe it. I thought, oh, well, this is a placebo effect. Until I kept doing it over and over and over in workshops and groups, etc., and kept seeing the same kind of extraordinary effects, sometimes in the first 10 minutes. I'll give you the most extreme example I have, which is from last summer. Um, I was speaking at an event. There were about 700 people in the audience. And what I usually do if I'm speaking somewhere is at the end put people into groups of 8 or so.
Mhm.
It doesn't have to be exactly 8, by the way. You heard how that was just an accidental process.
Yeah.
It works with 5, it works with 12. 8 is like a Goldilocks figure.
Okay.
It's an ideal number because it's not too big, it's not too little. But so we put them in, when I put them in 8 groups of 8 or so, I asked them to do intention, nominate somebody in their group with a health challenge, do an intention for them. And after that, I then asked people in the audience, so did anyone feel an effect? Raise your hand and tell us what happened. So we did this for about 15 minutes or so, and then I said, okay, one more person. And one group of 8 nominated a woman in their group called Maya. Now, we'd all noticed Maya. She was sitting on the front because she was in a motorized wheelchair. She was paralyzed from the neck down. She had some weird idiopathic paralysis. Nobody could figure out what it was.
Mm.
And so we asked her, okay, what happened to you? And somebody tried to help her get up. And she said, no, no, I don't need that. And she stood up
Mm.
and she just turned to everybody and she talked. Now, we were all flabbergasted. We were all crying. It was unbelievable.
Mhm.
And I asked her afterward, what happened to you that you had such a miraculous healing? And she said, well, I had such powerful, loving intention coming from these total strangers. It was almost too much for me. I was just so grateful for it, but I felt like this is more than I need. So she sent on some of it to a relative of hers with cancer. And believe it or not, the moment she did, she said, I sort of felt like my wheelchair was going through the floor. And it was just remarkable. But I see this all the time. And in the Power of Eight groups, we see it all the time with people doing it for the first time or people doing it over the year many times. I was speaking in a church not long ago, and we had a woman in the audience due to have knee replacement surgery. Her knee was so wobbly, she couldn't even stand on it. As soon as the people were finished, she did a deep squat for us. And she was able, ultimately, I kept in touch with her, she was able to cancel her knee surgery. We had another woman who couldn't even focus. She had a stroke and she wasn't able to focus her eyes and until she did the intention, and then her eyes slotted back into normal vision. And somebody else who had a dislocated shoulder in this event, and her shoulder, she didn't even she didn't want to come to the event, and her friends sort of forced her to come.
Mhm.
And her shoulders slotted back into place right then and there. And I have 1,000 such stories to
Mhm.
tell. The remarkable effects of this, which I don't can't really claim to fully understand. But I think it's that combination, as you said, of getting off of yourself, of altruism, plus the entering of the state of oneness, that powerful state of group focus that seems to connect us to a real healing mechanism that we all have, but have it's been drummed out of us by our teachers,
Yeah.
uh, sometimes our parents, and society and science.
Is there any difference in the group intention when we apply it to a person, an individual, or to a global situation?
Well, I think the only important element here, Jorge, is you need to be specific.
Okay.
That's one thing that I found in our intentions, and one thing that I teach is tell the universe what you want.
Okay.
So what we find is with the big global intentions, they work. I mean, for instance, we did an intention a few years ago for um, St. Louis, Missouri, which is officially the most violent place in America.
Mm.
Most specifically, in one neighborhood called I think it's a special bridge road, North Bridge Road, I believe, and it's the fairground area. And so we focused on that area and we did an intention over 6 days, just 10 minutes each day for 6 days. And I worked with a professor of statistics, Dr. Jessica Utz from the University of California. And she looked at several years prior of monthly violence statistics, violent crime and property crime for all of St. Louis and also Fairground. And then we looked at it 6 months after our intention. And she found and plotted that violence went up in St. Louis as a whole, continued to go up. Property crime in St. Louis continued to go up. Violent crime and property crime in Fairground continued to go up, but violent crime, the focus of our intention, went down by 43%.
Wow.
So,
That's a
and this
lot.
was over that, it went down immediately. It started dropping right after our intention and went down for the 6 months. So we find that, it works out there in the world just like it works for people.
Yeah, well, one thing
Uh,
when I mentioned before, how often, in this case, you're saying that that was 10 minutes during 8 days, consecutive days. That's what it works.
6 days, yeah. But we felt that only because one of the scientists, remember, we're feeling our way toward a, uh, the how-to for it when we started the intention experiment. It
Yeah.
had never been done before, so we didn't know, and we just thought, well, we decided on 10 minutes initially because we thought, well, if we have members of the audience who have never meditated before, this is about the longest they can hold their attention span. So that's how we decided the 10 minutes.
Yeah.
But since it worked, then I started experimenting with these small groups, and it worked for that too. So we stuck with it. Well, initially, the scientists said, well, don't try to just do it for one day. And with our early experiments, our intention experiments for peace, we did it over 8 days,
Hmm.
10 minutes a day for 8 days. Then we did 6 times, and then we've tried it just once, and it works just as well just once.
Okay.
So, for instance, one of the most remarkable outcomes came about a couple years ago when I was working with special equipment. I was in a studio that enabled me to put cameras and connect to 9 different locations. So we had a camera in 8 different Arab cities,
Mm-hmm.
conference rooms in 8 different Arab cities.
Mm-hmm.
And the ninth camera was in an auditorium in Jerusalem filled with Israeli Jews. So we had Arabs and Jews on this intention. And plus, we ran it over my YouTube channel so people around the globe could also participate. So we did an intention for an area of Jerusalem that was experiencing a big increase in violence, and we felt this was a good target because, Jerusalem really belongs to the world. It has a section for different religions. So we did this, and it was really remarkable because of that equipment. Afterward, I could ask the people in the different locations to talk about their experiences. And quickly we noticed the Arabs were saying things to the Jews like, your God is my God. And the Jews were saying things back to the Arabs like, we love you, sister. And people were passing love back and forth and crying, etc. And of course, afterward, one of the women said, this is so remarkable, one of the Arab women, because I've never actually seen a Jew before. We are taught
Mm.
that they have horns growing out of their heads and that, they are the hated other, they are the hated enemies. They want to kill all of us. And there was no talk of that. There was only talk of love. And that happened as well when I did an experiment inviting both Americans and Arabs to take part in the special intention experiment for the 10th anniversary of 9/11.
Mm.
And afterward, on my Facebook page, they were writing to each other, and the Arabs were saying, "You're our brothers from the other side," and the Americans were saying, "This is very healing for us after 9/11." And it was your God is my God, and they were befriending each other and they were forgiving each other. It was really remarkable to see. So I wondered about this, Jorge.
Yeah.
What is causing this
Mm-hmm.
heart to leap across the fence? And I got an answer in the work of a psychologist at the University of California at Berkeley called Dacher Keltner, who has done experiments with his students where he divides a batch of students into 2 groups. And one group gets photos, they're shown photos of the world's victims, like starving children. The other group is shown pictures that are designed to elicit pride in who they are. So pictures of fellow students at Berkeley, uh, uh, photos of the Berkeley team beating their biggest rival, Stanford University, things like that. So afterward, when Keltner then showed the 2 groups different photos, photos of diverse groups of people. The people shown the world's victims identified most with people who were not like them,
Mm.
prisoners, the homeless, the poor, people completely different from them. Whereas the students shown pictures designed to elicit pride identified most with the kind of people they would become lawyers, doctors, accountants, that kind of thing, other wealthy students. So I started thinking about that and I thought, what he's identified, and the reason that this happens has to do with a thing called the vagus nerve, which is
Mm.
the longest nerve in the body.
Mm-hmm.
It starts in the neck and it winds its way through all of the major organs of the body. And it is involved in helping the release of the hormone oxytocin,
Yeah.
which has been called the love hormone. It gets released when we are caring for our young and we are in love, like that. So I realized that, and what Keltner found is the vagus nerve gets activated. When it gets activated, as in when you see the world's victims, starving children, um, it makes people connect with people who are not like them. It makes the heart more open to allow for greater love for all humanity. And that's what exactly was happening with these Israeli Arab experiments.
Exactly.
Is suddenly the ability to come together to do an intention, to heal something in the world, to do something altruistic, enabled the heart to leap across the fence, even for an enemy, to embrace an enemy.
If somebody wants to organize a group of 8, what are the requisites for that?
Well, that's more than I can discuss in a, in a
I
very
know. I
short
know.
interview, I'm afraid. There's a lot of things people have to do.
Oh,
Um, but they they can have a look at my book, The Power of Eight, which gives some basic instructions. I also do many, many courses. I run foundation courses called Intention Essentials, which is kicking off very soon. It's kicking off this Saturday. I run the master class, which teaches people, gives people uh, real instruction, not only for intention, how to do intention, but how to use it for relationships, how to avoid negative intention, how to heal everything in your life, your finances, your career, relationships, and also your life purpose. For the purposes of this broadcast, however, and my masterclass kicks off in early February every year and runs for a whole year.
mhm.
And you can find a lot of that on my website, lynnmctaggart.com. But for purposes of this live broadcast, what people need to do, first of all, is get a group together. And a group of people, maybe in their own time zone. Now, I have a Facebook group page that anyone can join called Connecting and Healing Through the Power of Eight. So if you need other people to join you and create a group, you can just put essentially a little post on there saying, hey, anybody in Pacific time zone want to form a group? And we have thousands of groups being formed there. And very soon, we're going to have a new community site on my website, lynnmctaggart.com, which will give more instructions about how to just set up a group through the community too.
Okay, my intention is to create groups all over Latin America for the global Hispanic community for the tough times that we are going through. How can I do that?
Absolutely. Well, I think the first thing to do, I think, is to let people know about this and to encourage them to do this because I think we need to connect with other people, people who are in the same boat, who are locked down. We are losing community more than anything. That is the real casualty
Of
of
course,
COVID 19.
of course.
And I think the real difficulty is that we are not connecting with our loved ones. but the next best thing is a Power of Eight group. They really can bring you through this crisis. And that's what I've been getting people involved to do, is to meet regularly. And what my teachings are all about are helping people learn how to effectively do this so that they can meet, have a Power of Eight group as their intention family that they meet. I mean, many of the groups that form during my classes stay meeting. I have groups that have been meeting for 5 years, 6 years, and they carry on having extraordinary effects. They carry on healing conditions. We had a guy called Mitchell Dean, who was a clinical psychologist, who had suicidal depression, which is a terrible thing for a clinical psychologist to have. It's not a
Yeah,
good
of course.
ad for him.
Yeah.
And yet, with his group, they intended to see if he could heal this, and could he find the right treatment, the right modality to heal him. And they did this, and it was extraordinary because he got a kind of brainwave that he needed to go, after their intention, he needed to go to a Chinese herbalist. So he did, and the herbalist said, I'm going to test you. I want to see how your liver's working. And he found that one of his liver filtration systems wasn't working. And by giving him some herbs to heal that, that clinical depression that he'd had pretty much all of his life was healed. So those kinds of things happen when you meet together over time. And I've had people down to their last $200, and they've worked with their group, and suddenly windfalls appear, and for exactly what they need, which is amazing, the exact amounts that they need. And even people who want a new life purpose, suddenly something appears in regularly meeting. And that's the key. It's not a one-time thing. It's something about regularly meeting that is really powerful.
Do you have any information in Spanish in your website?
Well, our new website will be translatable in all languages.
Okay. So I can promote it so people can go and check it out. Your courses, do you have anything already recorded in Spanish for a course for Latin America?
I will do. I'm working with someone in Spain who is planning a live event with me in Barcelona, and we are hoping to do some online events too, to translate some of the work that I do, the online courses. Now, the plan is to do the course in March of next year, to run it on the 27th, 28th of March.
Okay.
We'll have to see what happens with COVID,
Yeah, of course,
as to whether or not people can go and travel and congregate together, whether I can leave the UK and congregate in Spain
of course,
without having to self-isolate both ways. So we'll see, but the plan is sometime in 2021, definitely, to do an event there and to start doing some online courses.
Well, let me know.
We will indeed, Jorge.
I would like to support your work, and I think Latin America needs this today more than ever. So the whole world, but my mission is Latin America, so that's why.
That's so wonderful. Thank you.
Lynn, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure to talk to you again, and I hope to see you. And I don't know when, but at some time, at some point, you will come to Los Angeles, and we'll get together.
I would love to. I will indeed, as soon as they let me in there.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.